Ah. Yeah, I think that makes sense. Okay. Sorry. Candidates for Congress, please make your way to the stage. Candidates for Congress. Is that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? Who are we missing? Carl. Where's Carl? Carl's in. We got him. Okay. Good to go? Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the CD7 Candidate Forum for our Democratic candidates for Congress in our primary that we will be having this June. Thank you very much for showing up on a random Wednesday in April. For those of you that showed up early and sat up front, please take a look behind you at all the chairs that we've had to add to the venue. And you can see how many other people showed up. This is wonderful turnout. We really appreciate you coming here. We know this is definitely something that the committees that put this together wanted to give all of you an opportunity to actually get to see your candidates and hear what they have to say. And I really thank them for all the work that they've done to get this together. So our sponsors for this event, the three committees that put this on, the Fredericksburg Democratic Committee. If you are a Fredericksburg Dem, let's hear it from you. All right. And their chair, Ken Leckie. The Spotsylvania County Democratic Committee. And their chair, Jeff Kent. The Stafford County Democratic Committee. Ooh. Stafford showed up. And their chair, Howard Rudat. Is he it? Oh, there he is. Also, the UNW Young Dems. Yeah. Our media partners with the Fredericksburg Free Press. And when you show up to a place like this, it doesn't just suddenly unfold like a sheet of paper. A lot of people have to put this together. So big thanks to the staff here at the Expo Center. Thank you so much for all that work that you've done to help us put this together logistically. Thank you. So we'll go ahead and get into it. First, a few rules for the debate here. We would like you all to refrain from applauding during the debate, but in classic Jim Lehrer style, I can say that you can now give it up for our candidates for Congress. We have Carl Bedell, Delegate Brianna Sewell, retired Lieutenant Colonel Eugene Vindman, former Delegate Elizabeth Guzman, Prince William Supervisor Margaret Franklin, Prince William Supervisor Andrew Bailey, and Cliff Heinzer. So the rules for the debate, it's pretty straightforward. All the candidates did hear all the rules before the debate, just so that you know what the format is. We'll generally go over that. The first two candidates, literally in order on the stage, will each be given the same question. They'll have 2 minutes to respond, and then 1 minute follow-ups to follow. And then the next two candidates on the stage will then get another question. And then it will keep going down the line until our last candidate will then have the same question as our first candidate has. For that, they'll be given 2 minutes for the first question, 1 minute for follow-up. For timekeeping, I'll be handling timekeeping. They'll see a paddle here, just so that they know it is 30 seconds left. Time's up. You're over by 5 seconds. You're over by 10 seconds. No one wants to hear that, so don't go over by 10 seconds. Don't even go over by 5 seconds. So thank you all very much, and I believe we are ready to get started.
Okay, we're going to start with the opening remarks from the candidates, and we're going to start with Mr. Bedell at the end.
Great. First, thank you all for being here. This is an incredible event. This is by far the largest event I think that we've all been at as a group. My name is Carl Bedell. I'm a former Army officer. I was an intelligence officer. I'm a lawyer. I'm a small business owner, and I'm not a career politician. This is my first foray into elected office. When I graduated college, I put on uniform and I served our nation. And when I finished my military service, I started working with nonprofits and working in the community because I felt like our government system was broken. I thought, like a lot of you, that nothing's getting done, and probably like the 86% of Americans, that Congress is not doing their job. I finally got tired of what I was seeing going to Washington. I got tired of seeing people that I didn't think were deserving of the respect and the position that they were holding when they became a congressperson. We being an exception in the 7th District having Abigail Spanberger, but I think a lot of the country is not in that position. And the big issue I think that I see is that we don't have enough people who have the characteristics of loyalty and honesty and are willing to do the right thing. I believe in putting people before politics, and if you elect me, that's exactly what I'll do. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Delegate Sewell.
Thank you so much for having me. I am Delegate Brianna Sewell, and I was born and raised here in the 7th District. In fact, I spent my life here. I was born and raised in Prince William County, and for the past 15 years, I've worked at the local, state, and federal levels of government here in the 7th District. I'm the daughter of 2 Air Force veterans and the granddaughter of a foot soldier who served in the Civil Rights Movement. And as you can imagine, they've instilled in me the importance of service beyond self, and that is something that I have truly dedicated my career to. At a time of such division here in our nation, we know that we need a leader and a congresswoman who can build community, and someone who is truly going to fight for Virginians and what they need most. And that's a roof over their head, food on the table, access to affordable quality health care, and hopefully just one job to do it all. And that's what I've done as a member of the Virginia House of Delegates, and that's what I'll do as your next congresswoman. I have a rule that each piece of legislation that I carry and fight for in the General Assembly has to be rooted in the stories of the community that I represent, and I will take that same measure to Congress. And something to note about that is that, to me, representing people starts by listening, and that is something that is exceptionally essential in our next congresswoman. There is so much at stake in this election, and there's nothing that we want to leave to chance, and we need a proven leader who is able to get the job done and work on behalf of the people of the district, and that's me. I've been fighting for our democracy, and I'll continue fighting for our democracy every single day. And I thank you again for having me, and I look forward to participating in today's discussion.
Mr. Vindman.
So first, let me thank this wonderful crowd, Spotsy, Fredericksburg, Stafford, for coming out here. Your engagement is really a mark of how important you take this race and how important it is to hold this district. And thank you to the moderators. My name is Eugene Vindman. I'm a husband, a father, a veteran. I'm also an immigrant. I came to this country at 4 years old with my family of 5. We had less than $800. We had each other and the American dream. I'm not going to spend a great deal of time talking about my bio. There's a lot of information available about me. Some of it true, some of it not true, depending on what sites you're looking at. But what I do want to spend a little bit of time talking about is a couple of interesting developments that I hope we talk about today, this week. Yesterday, this morning, the President signed a critically important foreign relations bill. So I hope we talk about foreign relations because supporting our friends and allies overseas is critically important. But another just as important development, frankly, in the economic realm. And this is about the reorientation of our economy over the last few years. The Biden economic plan is going to take time, but I think it's on the right track. So what I'm talking about is this FTC rule that eliminated largely the non-compete clause. That and then the FTC's rules and attacks on antitrust are critically important. And frankly, I think the President's on the right track in foreign policy, in domestic policy. I look forward to supporting him in Congress. Thank you so much for your attention.
Ms. Guzman.
Good evening, CD7 Democrats. I am Elizabeth Guzman, and 25 years ago, I would have never imagined that I would have a successful career in local government in Virginia, and I'll be running to be your congresswoman. When I got here as a single mother with $300 in my pocket. I juggled 3 jobs to make ends meet, which is still the reality of many Americans. But with the support of my family, I went to school where I raised my children and worked full-time. And today I have 2 master's degrees, one in public administration and a second one in social work. I got involved in politics when there was a discriminatory law that was profiling people who look like me and my family. And what I did was mobilize my community. Delete the effort to repeal that law, but I helped unseat every single Republican who voted for that law. In 2016, my son Carlos told me, who was born in Virginia, told me that we needed to go back to Peru because we speak Spanish. And what I realized is I decided to run for office to protect our American dream and our American freedoms. And with that, I flipped my district red to blue after 26 years by double digits. And in Richmond, I introduced over 100 of pieces of legislation, including landmark legislation as collective bargaining, paid sick leave, more school counselors, resources for military families and veterans. I am ready to hit the ground running. I have proven that I can win competitive elections, and I did it 3 times. And I am ready to be your voice in Washington, D.C. From women's reproductive rights to common sense gun reform and fighting for an economy that works for every American, I'm ready to be your voice in Washington, D.C., and I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Ms. Franklin.
Yes, thank you, and good evening, and thank you all to all of our hosts, and thank you to the moderators as well. My name is Margaret Franklin. I am currently a member of the Prince William Board of Supervisors, and I'm running for the 7th Congressional District. Many of you may have heard my story before, but I'm running for the 7th Congressional because I understand the challenges that working families faced. I grew up in a single-family household where my father raised my sister and I when my mother passed away from colon cancer when I was 8 years old. I saw the challenges that he struggled with regards to healthcare costs even after my mother passed away. So I understand the importance of reducing healthcare costs and making sure that we expand them, particularly for vulnerable communities, including our senior community. In addition, I'm running because I believe in expanding resources and opportunities for our education system. We talk a lot about banning books here in Virginia, but I'm here to tell you that our teachers and our administrators and our parents and our students just want to get through the school day. They just want to teach math, they just want to teach science and reading, they just want to make sure that their students have the resources they need to learn. In addition, focusing on making sure that we protect and even expand women's reproductive health care. When we talk a lot about protecting democracy, what does that really mean? Those are key issues that go along with protecting our democracy, making sure that our families have the basic necessities and resources they need to make it day to day, those kitchen table topics. In addition, supporting and making sure that we understand the importance of public safety and making sure that all realms of public safety is supported, not only from law enforcement, but from our social services workers as well. I'm running for the 7th Congressional District because I can be the most effective from day one. I've served 8 years as a staffer in both the House and the Senate in Congress, and I've been effective on my Board of Supervisors in leading for the Child Advocacy Center, leading on affordable housing, and creating a housing trust fund. With that, I look forward to your support and looking forward to meeting all of you. Thank you so much, and I'm humbled to be here. Thank you.
And thank you, Ms. Bailey.
Thank you very much. Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming this evening. I can feel the energy in the room. I am Andrea Bailey, and I'm running for Congressional District 7, currently sitting as the elected supervisor in Prince William County in the Potomac District. I'm running for this race because I believe that it is time for my leadership to go to Congress. I'm an inner city kid, born and bred in St. Louis, Missouri, raised in a single-parent home, in a 4-generation home by a single parent. And what that meant to me, it taught me about voting rights. I watched my grandmother walk the neighbors to the voting booth, teaching them how to vote when she didn't have an opportunity to vote in Macon, Mississippi as a sharecropper's daughter. I've watched my dad in the inner city of St. Louis serve the community at a higher level as he worked with who I call Uncle Bill, the first Congressional Black Caucus chair that we sent to Congress to represent our community. And I watched my husband as we served in the Marine Corps for 23 years in serving our country. And what that taught me is a level of service that was higher than none. It taught me how to serve nationally and internationally. Why am I running? I'm running because I believe that our democracy is at hand, and we must do something about that. I'm running because with my corporate experience, with my small business ownership experience, with my non-for-profit experience, and with my political experience, I believe that I am the elected servant that is here to serve you in District 7 at this time. I thank you for your participation, your engagement, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you. And Mr. Heinzer.
Well, first I'd like to thank Matt, Jeff, Ken, and Howard for all the work they put in preparing this tonight. My name's Cliff Heinzer, and I've dedicated my life to service, and I'm running for Congress here in Congressional District 7 so I can continue that service. I grew up in a working class neighborhood, but I studied hard. And after I graduated from Cornell, instead of making lots of money, I joined the Army. First as an infantry officer, then in the Special Forces as a Green Beret. After the Army, I joined the Foreign Service, where I sharpened my skills as a negotiator across the table from enemies and allies alike. And I gained experience on the Middle East, immigration, border security, and addiction treatment. But I left the Foreign Service after 20 years because I wanted to work on the issue of inequality. And that journey took me to the executive committee of my local NAACP, to the chairmanship of my local Democratic committee, and to knock on thousands of doors for local candidates. Now I'm asking for your support so that I can go to Washington and help to make lives better for Virginians, make the economy work for all, or that we get Congress back to work on a host of issues, including health care, traffic, the Middle East, and the chaos on our southern border. Thank you all for coming here to hear us tonight, and let's answer some questions.
Thank you. The first question will go to Mr. Bedell and Delegate Sewell. Abigail Spanberger is finishing her third term as U.S. Representative from the 7th District. Which of her policies, positions, legislative initiatives, etc., will you continue to support in Congress? Tell us why and how you do that, and try to be as specific as you can. Mr. Bedell.
Sure. So, Congresswoman Spanberger and I have a lot in common. In 2017, when she was probably sitting in a chair very similar to this, she never ran for office either. She was an intelligence officer in the CIA. I was an intelligence officer in the Army. She's been a great congresswoman for our district because she's willing to work across the aisle to find common ground that benefits the common good. As one of the founding members of the Problem Solver Caucus, she worked on policies like the infrastructure bill that came out that is helping fix our roads, it's helping put broadband in rural communities, and those are policies that affect all of us across the district. She's also worked to help ensure that Social Security is stable for us. She's helped with some of the legislation that impacted post-COVID to get resources out to the communities. And really what she's done is had great constituent services. I'm the only candidate up here who understands the rural communities. And while that might not play into Fredericksburg's calculus, it does play into the voters that it requires to win this district. I live in Greene County. I've lived in Northern Virginia for 11 years, so I do understand what it's like to live in Fredericksburg and to rely on the Washington, D.C. economy. But I also understand and relate to those people that live in the 8 rural counties that are really the swing votes for our district. And so like her, I will be present. I will be present in the rural communities. I will also be present here in Fredericksburg and in Stafford and Spotsy, because I truly believe, like she does, that it's the people that we represent that matters.
Thank you. Ms. Sewell.
Yes, very similar to Congresswoman Spanberger, I am focused on listening to the constituents of the district and making sure that we are delivering results. And this is something I have a track record of doing in the Virginia House of Delegates. And there are some common similarities I can point to. So for one, constituent services, making sure that the constituents know that I'm not simply just voting up or down on key issues that they care about, but also making sure that I'm addressing those issues and concerns which are impacting their daily life every day. In fact, Congresswoman Spanberger's Prince William District office is the same office that I once worked out of. And now, as she's delivering funding to the district on key projects, we have many similarities. So for instance, in Prince William County, Congresswoman Spanberger works with the Prince William County Police Department to address the fentanyl crisis. At the state level, I have worked this year to implement naloxone in every public school from K through 12 to ensure that our students and our teachers have the resources that they need to ensure that we are addressing the opioid epidemic and providing that necessary antagonist when tragedy strikes. I, like Abigail Spanberger, have addressed healthcare. She has fought very diligently in Congress to make sure that we lower the cost of insulin. At the state level, just this year, I was able to fund mammography van units from all across the 7th District that will be of service to all Virginians to make sure that where you are located here in the Commonwealth will not be a hindrance to your ability to get necessary health care. And the list goes on. I will continue to deliver for our veterans. I will continue to deliver in our rural communities and recognize that we must be of service. She has been able to deliver funding for the Carver Center, and I look forward to working on CTE, as well as making sure that we are delivering for those rural farmers and providing the necessary workspace for our small businesses to thrive. Thank you so much.
As a follow-up, again, about the Congresswoman's term in office, are there policies that she supported that you disagree with or think should be adjusted or improved upon if you're elected? What are those policies, and what would you want to change?
So, Rich, I don't have an answer to that. I'm not looking retrospectively. I'm looking forward to what I can do for the district. I know that Congresswoman Spanberger is very much loved in our district, and I think that's because she's out with the people and really cares about the people, but I haven't dug into her faults. I know that she's been very supportive of the constituents. I know that she has town halls across the district. That's something I would do. I know that she sits on the Ag Committee, which is something that's important to our district, but I don't have any kind of critiques as to what she supported that I would disagree with.
Okay. Ms. Sewell?
Very similarly, I feel that Congresswoman Spanberger has, again, done a really good job of being of service to the diverse demographics of the 7th Congressional District. This is a district which spans from the I-95 corridor to the Piedmont region and everywhere in between. And therefore, that requires a great deal of listening to make sure that you're meeting the needs of the constituency. And I look forward to traveling every corner of the 7th District in the same capacity as your next Congresswoman.
Okay, thank you.
Hello. This question will be for Delegate Sewell and Mr. Vindman. As of right now, there are federal laws prohibiting the use or sale of marijuana on a federal level. Would you join and work with Senator Booker in establishing legislation that decriminalizes the sale and use of marijuana federally and establish appropriations that would assist those affected by the war on drugs to establish dispensary businesses, education, and other reforms regarding marijuana?
Sorry, can you restate the question? That I missed the end of it.
No, it's okay.
Can you get a little closer to the microphone? I'm sorry, it's a little hard to hear.
Is it just me? Can you hear me now?
Okay.
Okay, that's better.
Yeah, that's better. Thank you.
No problem. I said, as of right now, there are federal laws prohibiting the use or sale of marijuana on a federal level. Would you join and work with Senator Booker in establishing legislation that decriminalizes the sale and use of marijuana federally and establish appropriations that would assist those affected by the war on drugs to establish dispensary businesses, help educate, and other reforms regarding marijuana?
Yes, thank you so much for the question.
You're welcome.
Very much like Congresswoman Spanberger, I feel that we should ensure that we legalize marijuana, tax it, and regulate it. And it's for a host of different reasons. So for one, there are environmental impacts. We recognize that when marijuana continues to go unregulated as a substance 1 drug, that prevents us from being able to regulate the different chemicals that are being used on our land, and that impacts our waterways as well as our land and our farming ability. 2, yes, there absolutely are disproportionate impacts as far as how marijuana and cannabis in general is processed through our judicial system. We know that there are disproportionate impacts based upon minority communities. We also recognize that because we have not legalized marijuana at the federal level, that this is now a primarily cash business. So it's not going through our banking system, and we're missing out on significant revenue through a formal taxation system. And lastly, we also recognize that by operating under prohibition versus regulation, there is no real way in which we are able to keep this out of the hands of teenagers. So I absolutely would support an effort to legalize this. And we recognize that 37 states plus Washington, D.C., Guam, and Puerto Rico have already provided medicinal marijuana use. Here at the state level, we have already done the same, and there was an effort to legalize marijuana and to establish a formal regulatory system at the state level just this year. And sadly, that piece of legislation was vetoed by the governor. This could create further safeties and prevention of harm at the state level, but most importantly, we're talking about the federal level, and I look forward to playing a role in that.
So I do think that marijuana should be legalized at the federal level. I've been a federal prosecutor when I was in the Army JAG. I prosecuted drug cases. And we've actually put out soldiers that had been serving honorably up to that point for use of marijuana. And these are folks that wanted to serve and were recreationally using marijuana. And the bottom line is, when I look at an issue like this, I look at the impact on kids. That's my first concern, to make sure that kids are not, that this has not become sort of a gateway to other drugs. But marijuana is frankly not any more dangerous than alcohol in many regards. And there's been a really significant disparate impact on minority populations related to marijuana. I think that when we do legalize it, we need to wipe records clean, expunge them, or make sure that they're not seen, that we also correct issues related to access to federal jobs. This sort of dichotomy between states where it's legal and federal, the federal government has created a number of serious problems. So I would legalize it, I would heavily regulate it, I would make sure that it stays out of the hands of children, and that's it. Thanks.
Thank you. And this goes up to the follow-up to the question. According to the Brennan Center for Justice, mandatory minimums should end because of the inflexibility, the harsh sentencing, exacerbate crime, and racial disparities occur. If elected, would you sponsor or co-sponsor a bill to eliminate mandatory minimums regarding federal sentencing guidelines? Delegate Sewell.
Yes, I've done so at the state level.
Yeah, so I think I'm the only former prosecutor on the stage. I think sentencing guidelines typically are what they're guidelines. So in the military, we had a number of factors that we considered for sentencing. I think the guidelines ought to be flexible, but they ought to, what you want to do is you want to create a scenario where there's equity, right? Especially if we're looking across the state or we're looking across the federal government, equity across all the jurisdictions. And so a guideline just provides a rough outline, but a mandatory minimum, for instance, that is inflexible is problematic.
Thank you. This question is for Mr. Vindman and Ms. Guzman. According to a recent Gallup poll, a majority of Americans under 25 use social media not only to discuss and free expression, but also to find the news. However, earlier this morning, President Biden signed into legislation a ban on different social media platforms. My question to you is, how do you envision balancing the need for regulation to address different concerns and ensuring freedom of expression online?
Yeah, so I come at this issue from a particular mindset. I spent 25 years in the military. I worked at the White House. I was privy to a lot of information, sensitive information. The bottom line is, we're not talking about banning social media. We're talking about banning TikTok, right? And if that's the question, TikTok is owned by ByteDance, which is an arm based on the laws in China. The Chinese have access to whatever data is on TikTok. The other thing is TikTok, there was a study that recently came out that these search terms for topics like Tiananmen Square or Tibet are nearly impossible to find on TikTok. I don't think it's a free and fair platform. It's run by one of our greatest peer competitors. I think it does have an algorithm that causes extreme views or propounds extreme views. And so when it comes to TikTok, I take a pretty hard line on that from a national security perspective. I do believe in freedom of expression, and we don't have these problems with like Instagram or Facebook or other systems. But when it comes to TikTok, and I understand how ingrained it has become and how many people use it, I think we have to really pay attention to the national security implications here. We do not want our main competitor to have that level of influence. They don't allow our social media platforms in China. So this is a parity issue.
Well, I think that right now the concern about social media is the impact that it's leaving on people and affect their mental health. As a social worker, I have seen that, and as a mother, I have seen how these issues highlighted in social media, including TikTok, impact the daily lives of children as well. So what we wanted to do is we need to have a good community, because young people and children are disappointed. But we needed to come back and tell them that what we want is accountability, and it's the job of the government to hold these companies accountable. And what we're asking China is to find a counterpart that is going to be here in America that can follow our rules and regulations, and we can ensure that the privacy of the users are protected. But in fact, I would say that this issue goes beyond TikTok. I think we have seen it throughout the latest years, the impact of Facebook and Google. The way that they have done our social media that is biased because they're influencing those that they are supporting their campaigns had to stop. They're appropriating the media market in a way that nothing that is not mentioned in Google or Facebook is not true. And that's something that we have to implement and hold them accountable. They are bankrupting other media outlets out there who provide unbiased information. And, finally, we see how these organizations are doing well financially. However, what is the government doing to ensure that the workers for those organizations get advantage of those profits and they are taking care and providing good benefits? Thank you.
A follow-up for you. Do you agree with the federal government's ability to regulate private companies, including the forcible sale of private companies such as TikTok?
So look, this is going to be an issue that's litigated. The federal government undoubtedly has the right to regulate, and the federal government has in the past regulated. And in fact, when it comes to sort of mainstream media, the federal government has prevented other foreign entities from owning or having a major stake in our media. The social media has sort of had a carve out because it's something that the regulations, the original regulations and laws didn't really cover. So undoubtedly, the federal government can. I think it should be litigated. It would be litigated and needs to be resolved quickly, because the sooner this issue is resolved, whether it's a sale or whether it's, ultimately TikTok shutting down. There are other venues like Instagram. I read an article that said Instagram would pick up 60%. So, thank you.
Yes, it is the role of the federal government to provide oversight and regulate to ensure that those guidelines are appropriate for the American population. And it's not about control. What it is, it's about accountability and transparency. It's the government job to ensure that these organizations are going to do the job that they are advertising to do. So it is appropriate for the government to provide regulation, and it's about protecting people's mental health. It's about protecting people's privacy. So I would support the regulation. Now is my question.
Oh, thank you. My question is for Ms. Guzman and Ms. Franklin. April 20th marked the 25th anniversary of the Columbine school shooting in Colorado, and last April 16th was the 17th anniversary of the Virginia Tech massacre. What role should Congress have in restricting the automatic and semi-automatic weapons that have been used repeatedly in mass killings in this country?
Well, I believe that the federal government play an important role, and I will partner with Senator Warner and Senator Kaine and the rest of the delegation to implement the laws that we have enforced in Virginia, being an example in the southern region for saving lives. Starting from banning assault weapons, starting with criminal background checks, to regulate the market for ghost guns, and ensuring that, we are saving lives, red flags laws. We have to empower law enforcement to be able to enforce and take those guns away from domestic violence abusers. So it plays an important role, and the time is overdue. We cannot continue to lose lives due to gun tragedies, and these touch into my district. When I decided to run for office back in 2016, my neighbor, Krista Hamilton, was killed in front of her child by her husband, and her husband was a domestic violence abuser. So it was our job to deliver so there are not more tragedies like that happened to my neighbor. So it's a responsibility. We have to lead as an example, and as a leading country in this world, we cannot afford to lose more lives due to lack of gun reform.
Thank you so much for this question. Let me start by saying over the past 2 years, I've been working quite effectively to reduce gun violence on the Route 1 corridor, particularly throughout Prince William County. I will also say that is absolutely right. We have to ban assault weapons. We had a 94 ban. It was bipartisan, and obviously we haven't seen one since. There are other things that need to be done. We've talked a lot about background checks, universal background checks, closing the gun show loophole. We know what needs to be done with regards to reducing gun violence. We need a Congress that can actually get it done. I'll just end by saying I actually worked for Senator Gillibrand at the time of Newtown, where we obviously had 20 children who perished and 6 adults. We thought that this was the time to actually pass some meaningful gun safety reform. And what happened is we put 6 bills on the floor and it died, all 6 of them. We particularly, and I helped to lead this effort to ban gun trafficking because we found that a lot of the guns committed in crimes on the black market are being trafficked up and down the 95 corridor from New York City going down to Miami. We put that bill on the floor. It died by 56 to whatever the other side of the vote was. But the point is, 20 children died, and we still couldn't get anything done. We know what needs to happen. We need a Congress that can get it done. And if I'm in Congress, I would absolutely not just vote for legislation to curb gun violence. I would actually be proactively pushing for it. Thank you.
This is a follow-up question for Ms. Guzman and Ms. Franklin along the same lines. How high is this a priority for you? And what would be your specific role in Congress and commitment in trying to regulate such high-powered weapons?
It's definitely a priority, and that it has to come along with a good communications programs. As Democrats, we are not coming to infringe on your constitutional rights. What we wanted to do is to take guns away from those who are using it to kill people. There is no room for common assault weapons for civilians in the regular world. So it's a #1 priority, and this country has the responsibility, and we cannot leave it up to the states or up to local government. As the federal government that oversee the powers, we need to ensure that we have legislation in place that will protect lives.
Yeah, I can tell you as a locally elected official, Certainly, we can't do it alone. Certainly, it's going to take resources from Congress to make sure that states and localities have what they need to curb gun violence. It is absolutely a priority, is a number one priority, because we continue to see gun violence each and every day across this country. So it has to be a priority. I'll also just reiterate, the original assault weapons ban was bipartisan. The gun trafficking bill that I mentioned was bipartisan. Even when we were pushing for universal background checks, that was a bipartisan discussion at least. So we know it needs to be done. Again, we need a Congress that can do it.
Hi, this question is for Ms. Franklin and Ms. Bailey. Congress must fund the government each fiscal year. Over the past decade, federal employees had to worry about shutdowns and continuing resolutions, which is CRs. This has an adverse effect on federal employees. If elected, would you sponsor a bill that if funding is not passed, congressional members should not receive a salary until a full funding bill is passed and signed into law?
Thank you for that. Absolutely happy to support that. I'll put this into context a little bit. Number one, I think this region has the most federal employees in most parts of the country. That's number one. Number two, I was actually, and probably like many of you, was a victim of some of those funding bills that did not get passed as I lost out on pay. And by the way, was not making a lot of money to begin with. And so I understand how important it is. But let me also put into context that while it's important to hold Congress accountable for the inaction in which they deal with, I would point out that we see a more diverse Congress these days. We see more members of Congress being elected that don't come from wealthy means. And so while I am able to support something like that, we do have to be mindful that we do have a more diverse Congress that may not be able to give up a paycheck for that instance. Let me also just point out that we've seen what's happened over the past really couple of months with regards to the CR. If Speaker Johnson even attempts to talk to Democrats, his speakership is threatened. We've seen what happened with the other two speakers. And so we're dealing with incredible times right now. And so we ought to be mindful of kind of the state of play in Congress, but we also have to be mindful that these are real paychecks. These are real people that are suffering that don't get paid when Congress is bickering over small things. And we need a Congress, and we need a member of Congress like myself who can actually go in, get it done, enforce the discussions.
Thank you. Ms. Bailey?
Thank you for the question. I would absolutely support that. That falls into the category of why are you in the seat? Why are you in the seat? It's for the accountability of the people, to serve the people. And when we are playing around with people's lives and we are not being accountable to the people, then that gives us carte blanche not to make decisions for the people. And so for me, I would support something like that because it goes under the auspices of understanding my accountability to my community. And when you are talking about people that are trying to make ends meet, trying to support their families, all of that is the accountability to the people. And so I would definitely support that. And I would absolutely be willing to relinquish my salary for the people because it was me that asked the people to go to the seat.
Thank you. And my follow-up question to that is that the national debt is already near an all-time high relative to the size of the economy and is projected to nearly double over the next 30 years. Do you think this is a problem? And if so, what is your plan to put the budget on a more sustainable trajectory?
Sure, thank you for that. Number one, we need to actually pass a budget rather than CRs. We have an appropriations process. We need to make sure that we're going through that appropriations process in a timely manner. I can tell you right now that Congress is mulling over, I believe, FY25 measures. We're already in FY25, so that means we're already behind. But we need to make sure that we're having responsible discussions around actually creating a budget that we actually get to pass. We haven't done that, and quite frankly, it's because of the bickering that's been happening on both sides of the aisle. So we need a bipartisan group of responsible members that can bring people together and say, we got to get a budget done and we got to get it passed.
And so my response is absolutely. One of the things that really concerns me is that we are living by old legislation in Congress. And so that has allowed us to do a lot of things, including mismanagement of the national debt. And so it's imperative that as we are elected to manage, have a fiduciary responsibility to manage national debt, though that old legislation needs to be revamped, revised, to assure that the national debt is managed appropriately.
Thank you. My question is for Ms. Bailey and Mr. Heinzer. The U.S. role in NATO and in Pacific defense and security could be open for major changes depending on who wins the White House in November. What role do you think the United States should play in ensuring peace and security around the world, and how would you work toward that goal?
I appreciate that question. My thing is, I believe that the United States is the honest broker and the bridge builder to the world. I believe that because, in serving with my husband in the military, I've seen how provisions for other countries are made at a traditional and higher level. And so I think that the United States has to take ownership for the fact that we are power brokers for the nation and for the world. And so we need to be about serving in that way. And so I think we have lost our way in terms of what that responsibility means, and we've lost our way mostly during the COVID era when people were not focused on that level of service. And so I would see myself as a member of Congress as an honest broker and working with different countries in the world to make sure that we are serving at a higher level as it relates to NATO.
So I just have a question. Did I get that question because I have my NATO pin on tonight?
Just the luck of the draw.
So we cannot disengage from the world. And we have all the experience we need to know how bad the outcomes can be when we look at our isolationism before the Second World War. But we have a different strategic situation. So today, one of the things we need to look at is how can we influence? And the fact that our strategic military industrial bases become hollowed out is a huge problem and changes that dynamic. The Office of Naval Intelligence estimates that if we had to start building a fleet for a conflict in the Pacific tomorrow, that China could produce 232 times the ship tonnage that we could in the same period of time. Look at the difficulty we're having producing artillery shells right now to support Ukraine. So one of the things we have to do is we have to build up our economy. We have to bring back some of that industrial capacity back to the U.S. Remember what we did before World War and during World War II when we turned auto factories into tanks. We wouldn't be able to do that today. An implication of that, though, is that we've got to rely on alliances. So this $60 billion we just provided Ukraine is the beginning. It will need more. We've got to rely on NATO, as we have for the past 75 years, to be the buffer in the West. In the East, it means reinforcing our relationship with Japan and South Korea, which we've done recently, and also providing assistance to Taiwan. Happy to talk about this more later. Thank you.
You don't want to hear
So
that.
as a follow-up question to Ms. Bailey and Mr. Heinzer, this is a little more specific. What should the U.S. role be in creating a peaceful and stable Middle East? And how would you work toward that goal?
Could you repeat that, please?
Sure. What should the U.S. role be in creating a peaceful and stable Middle East? And how would you work toward that goal?
I think the United States' responsibility is to preserve humanity. That's very important. And I think that, again, I will say that we should look at ourselves as the honest broker and the bridge builder, and coming together with other nations to create peace. And so I think when we preserve humanity and we provide aid for humanity, I think that that's the starting point. I think that we should not participate in the violence part of that negotiation at all. And I think it's imperative that we understand our roles and we walk in our role as the honest broker.
U.S. national interest is in having a peaceful and a stable Middle East. We're not there right now. And I must say, I am not convinced that additional aircraft and bombs are going to get us there. I was particularly concerned, and we're all looking, of course, at the security situation in the wake of this horrendous Hamas attack on Israel and then Iran launching all of these drones. But I'm also concerned about the humanitarian situation in Gaza, and I'm asking the question as to whether or not the $14 billion, some estimates say $17 billion, that we've just decided we're going to give Israel, if it's being provided with the appropriate security assistance safeguards to make sure that we're also focusing on human rights. I'd like to see an end to the fighting in Gaza right now, and I agree with the administration that the last thing we need at this point is an offensive into Rafah where all of the refugees have been pressed. Thank you. And extra points to Matt. I'm making him work tonight.
This final question is for Mr. Heinzer and Mr. Bedell. As the cost of higher education continues to rise, many young adults, including myself, are facing significant student loan debt upon graduation. What specific policies or initiatives would you propose to address the growing problem of the college debt crisis?
Okay, so, and I very much understand, for so many young people, young professionals, they're asking, how am I ever going to pay down tens of thousands, or in some cases, 6 figures of debt? It makes it very difficult to contemplate buying a home or doing things. How do you enter into that phase of your life with that debt over your head? But here's the problem. If we did do, and we can certainly look at that, a debt relief, that doesn't actually solve the problem. And the thing that we need to focus on is making sure that higher education, job training, remain accessible to all Americans, and that the solution we find is equitable. The real problem is the cost of education. And one thing that many of you may be aware of is that higher education in the U.S. has changed its model from an education nonprofit model to a business model. The consequences of that are we see fewer tenured faculty. We see no increase, in some cases a decrease in resources being put into educational facilities, but a lot more money being placed into administration. There's, I believe it's Pomona College out in California where we saw that they went from 56 administrators to over 300 in the space of about 20 years. So in order to really fix this debt crisis, we've got to bring costs back in line. That means not hitting students with fees to support semi-professional athletic teams. That also means that we don't want to promote the universities to keep increasing prices at a rate faster than inflation, knowing that we'll always be able to back it with debt. Thank you so much.
So I think my education experience was a little more recent than Cliff's and not quite as recent as Brianna's, but I went to an incredible school for my college degree, and I paid for it by receiving an Army ROTC scholarship. And I went to Georgetown University, and I paid for that by working full-time and going to school at night. So I understand what the cost of higher education can be. I think there's a few things that we need to look at from a federal level that can address that. So first of all, I had no debt because the Army paid for my undergrad, but I had significant debt going to one of the best and most expensive law schools in our nation. when I graduated law school. And the interest rate on my federal loans was the highest interest rate of any loan that I had, and it was the one loan that I could not get rid of through bankruptcy. Any loan like that that's guaranteed by the federal government, there is no need for the interest rates to be that high. Interest rates that are that high make it a bigger burden on students to pay those back. The second thing is loan repayment programs. Our federal government needs to amend and increase federal loan repayment programs for anyone that serves our country, whether it is in the military. We should look at federal government employees and increasing that, as well as teachers or firefighters or police officers. Anyone that's in a service capacity for our government, we should look at creating, if they don't exist, or making sure that they're better funded, those programs that do exist, so people who serve our country can get their student loans paid for. And then the last thing is we need to work with academia. So we make sure that when a student graduates from college, they have an education that makes them employable so they can go out and get a job and they can afford the education that they received.
The final follow-up for you all. How will you ensure that these college students and young Americans, which may be a large part of your constituency, remain heard and felt and represented if you were to be in Congress?
I think the key thing is outreach and making sure that I'm always accessible. And one thing I want to commit to you on is that if you do select me to be your standard bearer in this coming general election and then head on to Washington, that I will be accessible, that you won't have to worry about whether or not your constituent issue will be addressed. And that applies so much for young people. One of the things I can say that during this campaign I've been able to do successfully has engaged with young people. We've got so many tremendous volunteers who have been motivated to help this campaign. And I think it's also in part knowing what issues are important. I'll just offer you an example. Right now we see so many of our universities, and I understand it's true of Mary Washington as well, very concerned about the situation in the Middle East. And that's an issue I've been engaging on strongly. Thank you.
Great. So I've been very engaged with the young Democrats. In fact, 3 of my volunteers are here tonight. Tapley, Cole, and Jackson are all here. Tapley and Cole are from the UVA Charlottesville area, and Jackson is at Mary Washington. Last week, I met with the Charlottesville area Young Dems. I understand that we have to get younger people engaged. When you look around this room, unfortunately, the age, it's up there, a little bit older than me, I think, the average age. So we've got to do better at really engaging our entire constituency, and the large portion of that are the young people, the young college graduates, and we have to make sure that we're engaging them. We have to make sure that we're listening. We have to listen to everyone, though. As a congressperson, we have to make sure that we represent the entire district, not just one demographic, but the young demographic, the young Democrats, the young people in our communities, they have to be heard. And right now, they're not feeling like they need to be heard. So I feel like I've done a pretty good job of getting out and listening to the young people, and I will continue to do that, but I also continue to listen to all of you. Thank you. Young and young at heart. Thank you, Brianna.
Thanks for the answers to all your to the questions. Now it's time for closing remarks, and we're going to go in reverse order. We'll start with Mr. Heinzer and work back down to Mr. Bedell.
And again, special thanks to Matt, because I've done that job and I know how difficult it is. So, at too many doors that I've been to over the last 5 years, I hear the same concern, which is that our democracy is not able to address the problems that impact people's daily lives. And we see that we're dealing with a pull toward autocracy from part of our electorate because they feel disenfranchised, powerless, and anxious. But I would offer that in this election, the solution is not to fight former President Trump, but to get President Biden elected. I would offer that the solution to the MAGA movement is not to fight it, but to provide a better alternative to Virginians and a better path forward. I would offer that this is not about battling the Republicans, but that we can win by doing something that they cannot do, which is win through inclusion instead of exclusion. So if you choose to send me to Washington, I will work tirelessly to get Congress back to work and also to make sure that the economy works for all. Thank you so much to everyone who came here tonight to hear us out, and I would just like to remind everyone that May 3rd is the start of early voting. Thank you.
Well, lastly, I'd like to thank you again for joining us this evening, and to the moderators. We really appreciate your attentiveness to our answers as well. I want to say that the reason why I got in this race is because I honestly believe that my leadership is needed in Washington. And I believe that because of the experiences that I've had in my life, not just being an inner city kid, but also just understanding business and understanding how to be accountable with finances and budgeting. Similarly to what I do now on the County Board of Supervisors. We just passed a bipartisan vote last night as it relates to our county. But that bipartisan piece is very important in what we do in Congress. And I will tell you that I've worked in a very bipartisan way, just like Abigail Spanberger, to get things done in my district. I've worked with Senator Warner and Kane, sat on panels with them as they've written legislation for the community. I've worked with Congressman Connolly and Congressman Whitman for a mental health facility that I helped establish in our county, bringing $16 million to our county with stakeholders in our county. So the collaboration and the working together to serve the people is very critical to me. And as a military spouse, I've watched Abigail Spanberger as she served this community by elevating the veteran perspective here in this community. I understand the importance of that as a military spouse. And so when you send me to Congress, I will be there to serve you in a variety of perspectives, but keeping my mind, and my resources on serving rather than fighting. Thank you for this evening.
Thank you all again so much for the opportunity to share my vision with you. Thank you to all of our hosts. Thank you to the moderators. You know, in closing, I'd just like to say, candidly speaking, this is a Democratic primary. There is not a lot of daylight between my colleagues up here and I on the core issues: healthcare, education, voting rights, myriad of the issues that we discussed tonight. What you all are going to have to decide when you go to vote is who can be the most effective day one in serving. And I believe that's myself. Again, I've served 8 years on Capitol Hill as a staffer in both the House and the Senate. I understand how to craft legislation. I understand how to push it through, even as a freshman. I understand how to work across the aisle and get bipartisan support. I understand how to work within a delegation. In addition, my work here locally speaks for itself. Again, I led the effort to create a child advocacy center to help victims of child abuse. That's been in existence for 3 years now, award-winning. I led the effort to create more affordable housing here in Prince William County, including creating a housing trust fund, which we're going to fund to the tune of $25 million over the next several years. I've been effective here on the local level. So when you all go to vote, you have to decide who can be most effective in representing your interests day one. I look forward to meeting all of you and speaking with you about my vision, and you can go to Margaret for Virginia, and looking forward to chatting with all of you. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much, CD7 Democrats, for having us here tonight. This is exactly the energy and enthusiasm that we need to keep Congressional District 7. You have seen tonight that there are very good candidates running for the nomination, and we all probably align on the same democratic values. However, for those of us who campaign to elect Abigail Spanberger, we know that this district is extremely competitive. And I would like to highlight that I am the only candidate who has won competitive races, not once, but 3 times. And the candidate who has the most legislative experience, as I served in the Virginia Assembly for 6 years. I am the only candidate who has represented rural communities, and the 7th district is 35% rural. I am an effective legislator, not because I say it, because the Washington Post, the Virginia Education Association, and the League of Conservation Voters has named me an effective legislator. And I'm ready to be your voice in Washington, D.C., and fight for health care for everyone, including abortion care. I am ready to fight for common sense gun reform, for a public education system that works for every child in Congressional District 7, fight for the investments in infrastructure that Congressional District 7 desperately needs. We need investments in jobs so we can create jobs and public transportation. And I will fight for an economy that works for all hardworking Virginians. Thank you so much for having me here tonight, and I hope I can count on your support. Early vote starts next Friday. Thank you.
So thank you to the moderators. We covered some very important topics. Thank you to the Dems in this room that are very much engaged. Democracy is on the line this election in 2024. I spent 25 years in the Army defending our freedoms and our rights at home and abroad. I worked at the White House. I was an advisor to commanders in the field. And that is the type of experience that I found that voters in this district value. This life experience and my professional experience. The experience of having stood up to Donald Trump when he attempted to interfere in our elections, in our democracy, standing on principles, and those are the principles I'm going to bring to the White House. So I will work with Republicans where it makes sense, but I will never compromise on our principles. So as a father of a young daughter, abortion is very important to me, that right, enshrining that right in statute. Schools, high-quality, safe public schools, infrastructure, which includes 5G, health care, I-95, these are the things that are important to me. As we approach this election, early voting starts next week. We're about 50 days and change from the election. This is a seat we must win in order to win back the House. I'm the only candidate that has the resources, that has outraised the Republican frontrunner. And I've done it by 3 times. So when you start to think about holding the seat, please consider the resources, the experience, the principles of the candidates. And I ask you to vote them in for Congress. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. I am incredibly proud to be a Democrat serving in the Virginia House of Delegates. And this is because this year we showed what is possible when you have a majority that is controlled by forward-thinking Democrats. We were able to pass paid family and medical leave, something I've been working on for the past 6 years, and have carried during each session of the House of Delegates. We also passed sensible gun violence prevention legislation. We have provided historic funding for our public schools. We have protected veterans' hard-earned benefits and made historic investments in mental health. And I played an instrumental role in the passage of each of these. And that's what we need in our next Congresswoman. We need someone who will take on the important fights and get things done. I've been humbled to be recognized as one of the 20 most effective state legislators under the age of 40 in our nation, and I don't say that to brag. I share that because I'm dedicated my life to being of service to this community. And that is how I view the 7th Congressional District. It's our time to define our story, for us to share our experiences and pass meaningful legislation that will strengthen our communities and the next generation. We need leaders who are willing to listen to our constituency and to fight for our values, and I hope to earn your support. I encourage each of you to visit briannaforcongress.com to learn more about me, and I look forward to socializing at the end of this forum. Once again, thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you all for being here. When I look out and see all of you and I see the other 6 candidates up here, I am very excited for the future of our country. It's obvious you care, and when I look at the quality of the candidates that are fighting to represent you, it's very inspiring for me, and I think there's great things in store for our great country. I am a proud American. I am the 4th great-grandson of a man who fought in the Revolutionary War. My mother served in the Army for 34 years. America means a lot to me, and that's why I'm running. We deserve representation that you can trust. You deserve representation that is honest and has integrity, is going to do what they say they're going to do, and are who they say they are. We need that. We deserve that. We haven't had that in a long time in our country and a lot of the people that are elected, and we need to change that. My concern is keeping this seat blue, so we have a Democratic House of Representatives. We need to full stop the rollbacks that the conservative courts are doing. We need to protect the women's rights to make their own health care decisions and the social rights that have been rolled back by Congress, or by the courts, excuse me, and we need a Congress that is going to work to get things done. As I'm out throughout the district, I'm winning the trust of people that I meet. Whether they're in Greene County and are farmers or independents, I'm winning that trust. And we need someone that is able to win that trust because we have to get votes from across the district. But those same characteristics that will allow me to win those votes are the same characteristics that we need when I'm in Congress so we can get stuff done and pass legislation that benefits us on a day-to-day basis. That's not happening. 27 laws were passed last year. That's historically low. We have to improve that. We deserve better as Americans. We deserve better in this country. There were a lot of questions asked that we all didn't get to respond to. I pledge to you, if you go to my website and sign up for my email distribution list, it's bedelforcongress.com. Sign up for the distribution list. I will respond to every one of these questions and email out responses to you. Thank you very much and look forward to speaking with you.
All right, thank you very much to our candidates. Another round of applause for our candidates. Thank you all so much for being here. Before we break down for our casual meet and greet time, we definitely want to thank our sponsors again. I want to thank our sponsors at the Fredericksburg Free Press. I think we have someone that might want to speak. Seth Silber available. He's coming on up. Please say some words for us.
Thank you. I'm here on behalf of the Fredericksburg Free Press. It's our privilege to be able to be part of this event. It's amazing to listen to all of the candidates. We are really fortunate to have 7 incredibly qualified people wanting to run and wanting to represent this district. So we really thank you all for doing this. And it's a wealth of riches for this community to have these many qualified people wanting to serve us. The Fredericksburg Free Press. We started a little bit over a year ago. And we started because of a need to have local news coverage in this region, which really was dwindling. We are a community effort. This is grounds up from the community, members of the community moving this forward. There's several key principles to what we do. We are nonprofit. We are nonpartisan. We had the Republican debate here last night. We are free to all. There is no paywall to access the news. It is critical that everybody gets to know what's in our community, what's going on in our community, and is educated. It is critical to our democracy that occurs. If you are not subscribed, I have no idea why you're not subscribed. Look at the orange cards. There's a QR code. Go to fredericksburgfreepress.com. Please subscribe. Again, it is free. I ask each of you to think in the morning, if you are subscribed, when you get our newsletter, think of 5 friends who could benefit from having access to the news. Send it to them and ask them to subscribe. Having knowledge about what goes on at a local level is critical to what we do. It's critical to our democracy, and appreciate everybody showing up. This night is very inspiring to all of us. Thank you.
And thank you again for partnering with our local Democratic committees. Again, give it up for the Fredericksburg, Spotsylvania, and Stafford Democratic committees. Also our UMW Dems. Thank you all again for coming. Now begins our casual meet and greet time. The candidates can get down from the stage and start talking to their
And a
possible
special
future
shout out to
constituents.
our CD7 chair, Matt Rao.
Thank you very much.